great to meet you. My name is Matan. I grew up in Jerusalem and had a normal childhood here in Israel. Went to the IDF, served for 6 years as a combat officer, finished the army service, went overseas. Really, do I need this? Can you not hear me in the back? Wow. Served for 6 years, traveled the world, 3 years off the beaten track, Mongolia, Kamchatka, Siberia, all kind of bizarre places. Came back to Israel. This trip was, I will say to you, because you're mixed kind of, so some of you are from the States. Yeah. So I will say that I'm 5th generation in Israel, and I was born into kind of the story of Israel. For me, it was never a choice. I was born to serve the idea of Israel. And then traveling overseas, but mainly living overseas. My ex-girlfriend was Australian. And when I came, I don't know if there's someone here from Australia? All right, so I came to Australia with her, and I landed in Sydney with the purpose of hating Sydney. Now, hating Sydney is not a very easy task because it's an amazing place. But for me, I'm telling, and I'm not saying it in any way to kind of, put anyone on the spot. I'm telling you my story. For me, Sydney was a threat on Israel because I was born to serve Israel. And I remember a time when I was there, we fought all the time. And in one of these times, she told me, why do you care? If Israel will have bad times, then we'll have another place to go to. And for me, the second she said it, I understood what was my problem. I told her it's exactly the other way around. If the situation in Israel will be difficult, I will definitely be there. If everything here will be perfect, then we might consider also other places. But for me, it was a pivotal moment in my life because that's when I transformed from being born into the Israeli story to selecting or choosing independently the Israeli story. I came back to Israel, moved to the Negev, in the south of Israel, traveled. I had an off-road motorbike. In one of the trips, I saw a Jeep traveling alongside with me. I said, whatever, they travel, I travel, it's all good. It took me a minute to understand that they're not traveling, but chasing me down. They got to me, took me off the path. Out of the Jeep came out 4 young Bedouins and kind of started hassling me and negotiating my bike. I tried to talk my way out of it. It didn't work. At some point, they brought metal bars. I pulled out my gun. I told them, if you want to be violent, I promise you I can do a better job than you can. They understood the message, went off. I went back on my motorbike, went home, hated all of them. All of the stigmas and stereotypes got a face. But after a while, when anger kind of came down, I understood that no one is going anywhere. And that pushed me to kind of drop everything I did at that time. I was 27 years old. And I took a loan from the bank and I started kind of going around between the Bedouin villages. To make a long story short, I established an organization named Desert Stars, which foster leadership amongst the Bedouin society in the Negev. I led it as a CEO for a decade. It became the largest organization working with the Bedouins in the south, and I'm super proud of it. Over 150 employees, and we're building now a massive campus of 27,000 square meters in the Negev, a youth village, what we call in Israel. So that's kind of part of what I did. After that, I wanted to take a year off. I have five kids, 5 boys, Nevo, Negev, Arbel, Tavor, and Sinai. So very energetic home. And I wanted to kind of, a year off. So we went to the US, to Cambridge, Massachusetts. Anyone from there? So we went to Cambridge and I did my master's in Harvard in public policy. For me, I will be frank with you and tell you that university was kind of never in my game plan. I never took it too seriously, but yeah, I got a good scholarship there through the Wexner. So I wanted to kind of spend a year outside, and Nevo, my older son, is here and he speaks English because of that, so that's cool. And I will say that turned out to also be a very important experience for me because that was the first time I encountered anti-Semitism. For me, anti-Semitism, while some of you maybe know it from firsthand, for me it was fictional. I'm Israeli, super proud. I didn't believe that it actually exists. And then in Harvard, I saw it quite clearly, especially by a Jewish professor that taught me there. That led me, again, long story short, to sue Harvard. kind of the legal battle continued for 2 years. Eventually, about a year ago, we signed a settlement where they committed to adopt the IRA policy, which is basically a paper against anti-Semitism that says there is no such thing anti-Israeli. Being anti-Israel, or to say Israel doesn't have the right to exist, is anti-Semitism. It's not anti-Israeli. So that's kind of putting it in bottom line. But that also changed the course of my life, because since then, I'm very preoccupied also with the front of anti-Semitism. We came back to Israel in August of 23. We moved home, so until we found ourselves together October 7th, I immediately went up to the north on October 7th, because we thought that in a second Hezbollah is going to come. And here I'm going to slow down a bit my story and tell you that in the reality of 2023, the people of Israel were probably in one of the low points that we had because of the political fracture that we have here. We literally had two camps, and on October 6th, we argued about the strategic question, obviously I'm cynical, of whether or not to have prayers in separation or not in Kikar Dizengoff. And at that very time, thousands of Nukhba terrorists were organizing themselves underneath our feet to do the biggest slaughter that Israel has known since the dawn of the state. And that shocked me, and many other of my friends who found themselves quite quickly on the border of Israel, prioritizing the existence of Israel over anything else. Now, I want to echo what I just said, because when you go to fight against an external enemy and you might not come back from that fight, like many of my friends didn't, basically what you say is the existence of this imperfect state, because it's not perfect, and many of us want to change it and for it to be something else. But the mere existence of the state is more important for me than anything else. It's more important for me than my life, than my mental health, than my kids, than my work. I prioritize the existence of the state on top of everything else. And this called Zionism. All right, the Zionist idea basically was created at the end of the 19th century, and for 50 years, give or take some, people have been working in order to make sure the Jewish people have a safe haven to live in, to be safe and prosper. That's the Zionistic idea. My claim that we're still very much committed to this idea, meaning the goal of Israel was and still is to be a safe place for the Jewish people to live in. That's it. Now, if that's the goal of Israel, I will tell you what's not the goal of Israel. The goal of Israel is not to be a liberal lighthouse. It's not to be the full land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael Hashlema. It's not to be a halacha state. All of these might be legitimate wishes of individuals, but it was never and still not the goal of the state of Israel. And this is something we need to acknowledge, and soon I'll tell you why I think it's so important. So on October 7th, we went up to the north. Quite quickly, we went down back to the south, and we entered Gaza at the beginning of November. And when we entered Gaza, we knew with 1,000 exclamation marks, we knew everyone that went in, people that on October 6th were at both sides of the spectrum politically, went in together to fight a real enemy, and we knew that if and when we will come back to Israel, we will come back to a completely different state, that everything has changed, and we will never, ever go back to the reality that was here on October 6th. And the hardest moment for many of us in this war, put aside all the, tactical catastrophes that we were in, because when you're in the battlefield, it's very messy and it's unpleasant and you lose people. And still, I want to argue that the hardest moment for many of us was in January of 24, when we came out of Gaza after a few months of isolation, and we opened our cell phones And we realized that nothing had changed. That the politicians are still the same shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear here, but it's how I speak. The media, same poison. Everyone are still arguing with one another, and each side is doing the chashbon nefesh, the soul searching of the other side. And instead of saying, before October 7th, each side blamed the other, that bad things will happen because of you. After October 7th, each side said, the catastrophe happened because of you. That's the reality we came back to. And we could not believe that. We came out from real enemy to families that are broken apart from one another. And on kind of a very intuitive gut feeling, we said, even though we are now kind of back home and were released from the army, back then we didn't know it's only the first round out of 6 that we did. I, in total, served 450 days as a major in the commando brigade in all fronts of Israel. But in January of 24, we still didn't know all of that. But we came out of Khan Yunis, and we said, even though we're out of the war zone, we are still in war. We still have the responsibility of making sure that Israel never goes back to what it used to before October 7th, because then the next catastrophe is just around the corner. And for a few good months, we went to the Knesset and we spoke to all the politicians here, right wing, left wing, doesn't matter. And we were shocked. We told them, step up to this historical moment and do the right thing. Work together to do one thing. Surrender the enemy. That's our goal now. That anyone that thinks about doing October 7th to the state of Israel immediately neglects this idea because they understand the meaning it has for them. And in order for that to happen, Israel needs to win. In the past, we used to win. It sounds bizarre, but in 6 days war, there are no 5 narratives of who won. One narrative. Israel won, the other states lost. Clear. Even the Yom Kippur War, where we were surprised, there's no argument there who won and who lost. The state of Israel doesn't have the privilege of not being a winner. It doesn't. It's existential for us. And we are not winning for many, many years. Another round in Gaza. I unfortunately participated in all of them. And the never-ending story. And with a very painful heart, I know that Nevo and my other kids will crawl in the tunnels of Gaza like I did, because this war, again, was just another round. We did not win. And this is an existential threat for the state of Israel, and I'll explain why. So we came out, I'm going back to the timeline, we came out, we spoke to all the politicians, we were shocked to understand how cynical they are. And for them, it's just another day in the office. We speak with them about the existential threat of Israel, and they speak with us about the political price. And we understood that, we don't have leaders in this state anymore. We have them, they're just not in the Knesset. In the Knesset, we have politicians, but they are not leaders. And we understood that from them, no good will come. In April, we were called back again to the army and served all the way until December, so 8 months in a row. And when we came out at the end of 24, beginning of 25, we understood that we need to do the one thing that we know how to do. In Hebrew, you say, acharai, follow me. We understood that we don't have the privilege anymore of trying to influence someone else to do the right thing. We only have the responsibility now to stand up and say acharai, again, I'll use many Hebrew expressions, but in Hebrew we call dugma ishit. You lead by example. You don't lead by speaking to others. Now, I never intended to be a politician, believe me. I'm an entrepreneur. I like to establish all kind of different organizations, not for profit and for profit. That's what I like to do. And each of us has their own story. We never intended to be politicians. We weren't, the school council, the head of the school council in 6th grade, nor the head of the university student board, whatever. It was never in our game plan. But we understood that exactly like we were willing to jeopardize our life for the existence of the state of Israel, now we must make sure that these values that were forged through battle and sweat and blood in the battlefield come back to be in the leadership of the state of Israel. That was our responsibility. And I want to say another word about responsibility. I think that Zionism, as I said, prioritizing the existence of the state above anything else, I'll say even more. Zionism, and I'm already now starting to put some of the responsibility on your shoulders, because I think you must. It's not a privilege. It's mandatory for you. Because Zionism really is for each and every one of you to feel that the entire responsibility for the state of Israel and for the existence of the Jewish people is on your shoulders, individually. There's no one to roll the responsibility to. And I think that the founders of the state understood it to the core. They understood that each and every one of them felt, and it's a bit of a megalomaniac, and nevertheless I'm telling you that this is Zionism. You need to completely feel responsible for the future of the Jewish people globally. It's a heavy lifting, I know, but you don't have any other privilege but to do so if we want to survive. Because if we go back to the conception of October 7th, each side tells a different story. I'll tell you what I believe the conception was, and unfortunately still is. The conception was that we don't have an existential threat. For years, people of the army and politicians and everyone told us that there is no existential threat, meaning the existence of the state of Israel is given and granted, and now we need to argue on what kind of a state it's going to be. And that's what we did for many years, and that's what we're still doing right now. Through this existential war, still both sides came back to their original positions, assuming that the existence of the state is safe and sound and never lasting, and now we can argue about which state it's going to be. And I say no. The existence of the state of Israel is far from being granted. And this is something we must wake up from. We must, because and it's not just this war that was on 7 fronts. When we look around at the global situation everywhere, and we can double click on whatever you want to kind of try and analyze it, but I think most of you understand even intuitively that the risks of being an Israeli and of being a Jew anywhere in the world are now far higher than they used to be. And this means to me that we can no longer pretend that the existence of the state of Israel is given, and it's something that none of us can afford, because even if you live overseas, and it's great, and I'm happy for people to live overseas, the existence of an Israel is the one and only real insurance policy the Jewish people can have. Place where Jewish people can defend themselves and rule their own destiny without being depending on anyone. So this is the conception, and now we're still deep inside of it. And that's why the generation of politicians that failed miserably, both in creating the narrative, the Jewish narrative. Think about when was the last time, you guys are young, you're 18, 19, who was the last Zionist leader who spoke in front of you and gave you a vision, told you what the meaning of the state of Israel should be, how it's going to look like 30 years from today. We used to have that in our, leadership. We no longer have that. Now they're speaking about all kind of procedures, legal procedures, or these procedures, or the Yoamashit, or the Patzarit. Who cares? We need a vision. It needs to be very inclusive for the entire Jewish people all over the world. My claim is that Israel must be the best place on earth for any Jew to live in. It doesn't mean that they have to, but it must be the best place for any Jew to live in. And if it won't be, then it simply won't exist. Because the powers that make it the miracle that it is will simply vanish. And this is on us, on me, on you guys. It's on our generation, because the generation above us who completely fucked it up will not be the one who will fix. So it's on us, And that's what we need to change together. So basically, we understood that the only way to do it is to go to politics. Now, you have to understand, for me to enter the village of Adese in Lebanon and lead warriors to fight was far easier than it was to open an Instagram channel. But I love Israel so much that I opened an Instagram channel and TikTok and everything. And it's very unnatural for us, but we understood that we first need to rehab people from all the bullshit that they hold with this right and left. And it's completely fake. I don't know if you guys, some of you see the videos that I post about Tasbiruli, explain to me. But basically, I open tables on the street and I invite people to tell me how they see the future. And I never know who comes and sit in front of me. Sometimes they're left wing, sometimes they're right wing. What I try to do is to present to them or to clash them with the Zionistic approach. An approach that understands that the goal of Israel is to be a safe home for the Jewish people, and not what the left and the right claim. Now let's try to dissemble a bit the left and the right to see how miserable, how both of them are so far away from the Zionistic way, and then I'll tell you what we propose, and then we'll open it up for questions. So basically I will say that for the past 30 years, when people here assumed that the existence of Israel is granted, then the left started to claim all the Western values, universalism and all the ism or liberalism, etc., 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 and turned it, and in the way he sacrificed and lost many things that are core to our existence here. The righteousness of the way, the connection to the land, the connection to Judaism. Today, often people from the secular camp, I am a secular, when their kids in Tel Aviv having a Torah lesson, they say it's Hadata, you're trying to make them religious. No, it's the Jewish book. That's what it is. We don't need to be intimidated by it and kick it away from us. It's part of who we are. And when we adopted all the progressive agendas, we've lost so many things along the way. In the state level, the left adopted the approach of two-state solution. Now, you have to understand, two-state solution is not a goal, it's a strategy. Strategy for what, by the way? For the existence of the Jewish people in their land. It's one strategy, one optional strategy. It's not a goal. When the left turned this into a goal, now imagine that. A fanatic Muslim, fundamentalist, terrorist, Nazis of Hamas, hear us say, if there won't be two states, we won't be able to be here. What do they hear? Put yourself in Hamas's shoes. What do they hear? Don't take the two states. Easy. When they hear it, you already lost. Because they don't care about human life. They say, okay, another round, another round, another round. Eventually you will cave in. You will give up. It's too difficult to be here. That's the core failure of the left, who turned a strategy into a goal. Now let's speak about the right. The right went so far off to all kind of fantasies that are born through religious or from all kind of things that are completely detached from reality, that the right-wing government that is in Israel for almost 20 years in a row, for 20 years they say us how dangerous it will be if, God forbid, there will be a left-wing government here, because they will do all kind of things, and then these governments implement one by one everything that they say that the left will do. And I'll give you an example. So we were told that if the left will rule, then we'll have a Palestinian state. If anyone here doesn't understand that, we were never closer to a Palestinian state. Only now we're getting it in its worst version. It's not coming out of a vision that we had and something that we were able to do a diplomatic work and kind of bring the world together to it. It's being shoved down our throat with enemy states of Qatar and Turkey that are going to actually have soldiers between us and Gaza, you still did not serve in the army. So I'm telling you, this is the worst scenario possible. I can exemplify it through Lebanon. In 2006, after the Second Lebanon War, soldiers of other states, not enemy states, by the way, here it's far worse, but other states guarded the border between us and Lebanon. They were fully cooperative with Hezbollah, and that turned Israel into helpless in its ability to actually defend its border, because everything that happens turns into a diplomatic incident. Now it's going to happen on steroids with Gaza. So people, the right wing who warned us so many times that the left will bring a Palestinian state actually created the Palestinian state in its worst ever version. More than this, the right wing, basically what they say that the era of Zionism and of democracy has ended. Now it's the era of Eretz Yisrael Shlema, the biblical land of Israel. That's, we're getting there slowly and slowly. Now, the paradox is that, Zionism, basically it's like saying pragmatism. The Zionist movement was very pragmatic. When you have the right wing, which lives in fantasies, what happens is they speak in the war about building a neighborhood for police officers in Khan Younis, and they end up surrendering to Hamas. That's the problem of fantasies. Because when you start bringing all your wishful thinking of Eretz Yisrael Shlema into the real world, and you say we're going to build settlements in Gaza, then you're not even able to win Hamas. That's the failure of the right. Now, I want to tell you, I want to try and wrap it up like this. When you speak only about peace, and you don't have the understanding that in order to bring peace, you must be at war or win wars, you will never bring peace. If you don't have the courage and the understanding that war is part of policy, crucial part of policy if you live in the Middle East, you will never bring peace. And if you only desire endless war with no vision, because you have all kind of faraway fantasies that are connected to no reality, you will never win a war. And that's why the right wing has never won a war. And that's why the left wing is not able to bring peace. Zionism held both of these things together. It was a synthesis, a synthesa between these two ideas. They understood that the goal is the existence of Israel. And all strategies are only strategies to achieve this goal. So a two-state solution is a strategy, a legitimate strategy, but it's a strategy. Occupation is a strategy, a legitimate strategy, but only a strategy. And even when you go back to the roots, Ben-Gurion was asked about transfer. And he said, we need to examine it, if it's doable and if it's needed. I want to say to you that in the Zionistic toolbox, everything is legitimate, as long as you remember that the goal is to be a safe and prosperous home for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. So, do you follow? Just kind of tell me that you're with me. All right. So that's the failure on the policy level. You'll be able to ask about it soon. I'll tell you the failure on the political level, and then very shortly what we want to do, and that's it. The political failure is this. In the past 30 years, in every Knesset, we have about 80 Zionist mandates. Now, I'll define what does it mean. It means that they're voters, the people of the parties. About 2/3 of the Knesset, the voters are Zionist, meaning they serve in the army or whatever, or used to serve. Now it's far less, but they generally speaking, they're Zionist. But on the political level, what happens to us? Some parties who are Zionist are doing a political alliance with non-Zionist parties that are saying we are non-Zionist, and they do it in order to win other Zionist parties. And that happens from both sides. So you see in this government, in an existential war where so many fronts were open in real war, you still see this government leans on the Haredi parties who are non-Zionist, not in their words and definitely not in their actions. And when you lean on them, you actually depend on them. They become the strongest force in the government because your government depends on them. And on the mirror picture of that is to establish, like Bennett did, a government leans on the Muslim parties. Now, they are obviously non-Zionist, and because the government depends on them, they become the strongest force in this government. So every time a Zionist party does an alliance, a political alliance with non-Zionists in order to win Zionist parties. This is the political tragedy of Israel. And this what must be changed. I think that in the state of Israel, even before October 7th, but definitely in the reality after, Israel does not have the legitimacy of having governments that are not Zionist from wall to wall. And the only way to accomplish that is breaking the two camps that exist today, of the right and left, both of them as far as one can be from the Zionist way. And basically, this is our political strategy. This is what we want to do. Meaning, we are putting our agenda that I'll soon put, and we try to bring voters from both political camps in order to make sure that Netanyahu can, under any circumstances, cannot establish a government leaning on the Haredi. And that under any circumstances, Bennett cannot establish a government leaning on the Arab parties. And we will join neither of these failed governments, because each of them, in their own unique and particular way, will lead us to the next October 7th. We will sit only in one government that is Zionist from wall to wall and includes parties from both of these camps. Basically, you can ask, but if they will sit together, why do they need you? They don't. And I wish that they will do it. But I understand that it's not happening here for many, many years. It didn't happen through this existential war, and that's why they need a Zionist force that will bring them together and say, I'm done with this stupid game of camps surrendering one another, and the price is the state of Israel. We are done with that. And that's why we will join only a Zionist government. Now, think about many things that today tear the state of Israel apart, or the Israeli society. When you have a Zionist government from wall to wall, many of these issues become no-brainer. For example, service. The issue of service, which is crazy, you have to understand the numbers. In Israel, in your age group, 18, 19, whatever, there are 150,000 boys and girls, men and women. How many out of them serve? 68%. So it's about 100,000, you say. 48%. 75,000. 50,000 go to the army. 40,000 will finish 3 years of service. About 10% of these will actually do miluim throughout their life. So when we say tzva am, the army of the nation, this is as far from reality as one can be. So you'll tell me, yeah, but some folks do national service. How many do national service? 10,000. So 60,000 serve. Some that don't serve have, health problems, mental problems, whatever. More than half do not serve at all. Most of them are Haredi and Arabs. Some of them are not. This is the situation as for today. Now it hurts us on various levels. One, on the national security level, which I choose to see the world through it. We need to exist. Before we can argue if the state needs to be more liberal or more conservative, we need to exist. If we won't exist, it'll be neither. Before we fight whether the state needs to be more religious or more secular, we need to exist. If we won't exist, none of this will happen. So we need to exist. For this, we need soldiers. How do I know? Because in the past 2 years, I served for 450 days. I know that for a fact. 20,000 IDF soldiers were injured in this war. 3,000 out of them were injured twice. And still, you have 15% of the population Jewish, sitting on the sidelines and explain to me why it's legitimate that they do not serve. It's not. You're more than welcome to see the videos I post on explaining why it's not, but it's not. So this, for example, something that tears the Israeli state apart. When you have a Zionist government, it's a no-brainer. Of course everyone should serve. Easy. It's an example of why this strategy solves so many core problems that we have. So basically, what do we say? We say we are fanatics of Zionism. We ask ourselves only one question, not what's good for my family, not what's good for my faction or for my camp or my ideology. We ask ourselves what's good for the state of Israel. That's the only thing we ask. We hold 4 flags on which we're going to go all in easily, because remember, we do not want to be politicians. I'll tell you even more. The first thing we did when we understood we go to politics, or the first thing I was afraid of personally, was me in 10 years. Because many good people entered the broken system and became broken like the system itself. And I wanted to protect ourselves from that. So we went and met many people that served in politics and understand the system from within. And we told them, give us all the constraints that you would want the central government of Israel to have. And they wrote a long list. We added some of ourselves, and we adopted everything to the last comma. Meaning, for example, term limits of everything, not just prime minister. In everything you do that is political, you come to serve and you leave. Because in Israel today, the second a person goes into the Knesset, they're already campaigning for the next round. Why? Why should it be like that? You're too young, but before you were born, if you have instructors here, we had a satirical series named Chartzufim. Your parents know it, the Israeli folks. The images of the Chartzufim were politicians. All of the Chartzufim are either dead, in grave, or still in the Knesset. You have to understand the absurdity. People that served 30 years and did nothing expect that we will now believe them, that suddenly they have seen the light and they will save us from the catastrophe they brought on us? Do we look stupid? This must change. So in order to do that, or to demonstrate it, we don't play in the, everyone tell me, so you'll sit with him or you won't sit with him. I really genuinely don't play this game. I don't care for names. If I could change the entire 120 Knesset members, I would do so in an instant. But I can't. If I could have brought 65 mandates alone and lead the state alone, I would do that. But I understand that there is a probability we will only bring 50 mandates, not 64, or maybe even just 5. Fair enough for first round. We said, how are we going to make sure that the state of Israel goes back to the Zionist way? So we wrote 4 reforms. And on that, we will be, like I'm saying to the Israelis, I don't know if the Americans know, but we want to be the Gafni of Zionism. When Gafni from the Yehadut HaTorah, from the ultra-Orthodox, he goes to the negotiation room, he doesn't care about anything. He doesn't care about you guys, not at all. He doesn't care about the state of Israel. He doesn't care about the IDF. He doesn't care for anything in the existence of Israel. He cares about 2 things alone: his educational system and his the money for his yeshivot. That's the only thing he cares about. We care about only one thing: the existence of the Jewish people in their land. Nothing more. We don't care about this or that settlement. We don't care about fake moralities. We don't care for any of that. We care for the existence of Israel, and we tried to express it through actual things. So 4 reforms. 1 is national defense. Part of it is that everyone serve. Everyone serve. 150,000 serve. First batch goes to the army because that's our priority. All the rest go to national service. No need for us to bring people from Thailand or from Gaza to work the lands of the state of Israel. It can be guys from Shfar'am and girls from Rehovot. It doesn't matter. Everyone serve the same length. By the way, today national service is 1 year. Say national service, like army service, everything is the same. And 2 very small paths that are unique. One is studying Torah. but that needs to be taken from the Haredi sector because doesn't belong to their sector. It belongs to the state of Israel that was established, by the way, by secular Zionists. Studying Torah is a Zionist value, but it needs to be standardized by the state and not by all kind of weird NGOs, and it needs to be limited for 2% of an age group, meaning 2,800 that will continue to study, funded by the state, and that will count as service for them. And another 2% for all other things that the army or national service cannot kind of make the maximum out of, like sports, musicians, etc. If you choose to give up on this incredible right to serve the existence of the Jewish people in their land, it's yours. We won't take you to jail. But together with that, you give up on many other benefits the state give you. Vocational benefits, financial benefits, etc., to the level that you cannot work for the state. Now you have to understand that the majority of the Arab sector who do not serve, and the majority of the Haredi sector who does not serve, are being employed by the state which they do not serve. Some in the Ministry of Education, some in the Ministry of Healthcare. This will not happen anymore. So basically, we say if you choose to not serve the state of Israel, it will be virtually impossible for you to live here, or at least very, very difficult. You can't enjoy both worlds. That's in terms of service. In terms of national security, to go back to who we used to be, the state of, imagine in 48, Ben Gurion and Chaim Weizmann and Yitzhak Sadeh and all these figures you probably learned about would see it and say, let's see what our enemy is doing and decide. That's not how the state was established. For 50 years, people created reality. They didn't respond to reality, and that's very different. You need a vision, and that will shock you. You need a Ministry of Foreign Affairs that can speak English and all kind of weird things that today seem very privileged and disconnected. You actually need to work. You need to do things in reality, not just tweet about them. You actually need capable people doing diplomatic work in order to implement the vision that Israel doesn't have but should have. And this vision basically say, peace, 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 and then some more peace. Because everyone here wants peace. Everyone. 95% of Israeli wants peace. The only question is, what do we need to do in order to get one? And that's where the problem is. I want a prime minister that speaks 10 times a day in 6 different languages about the aspiration for peace in Israel. By the way, eventually, every time someone really wanted to make peace with us, we did it. We never said to someone who wanted to make peace, no, we're not in this game. Look at the last 7 years. We did many, many peace agreements. So we want peace, but we also need to be clear with ourselves and with our enemies and with the world that if someone is not in the process of making peace with us, then they are in war. No mid-range. Israel, in the past few decades, invented all kind of bizarre expressions that doesn't exist in the real world. I don't even know how to say it in English. I'll say it in Hebrew, Mabam, the war between wars. המלחמה שבין המלחמות. What the fuck? What's the war between wars? If you want to make peace with me, you will find the best partner in the world. If all your desire is to demolish me, you will be demolished. This is the Zionist way. There's no other way. הבא להורגך, השכם להורגו. You want me to show you how I know we're still in conception? October of 23, after October 7th, the end of October, we were already 100,000 soldiers in Har Dov and the northern border. Everyone that served in the IDF have what we call operativi, meaning our mission for a day of war is to immediately enter Lebanon and push Hezbollah north of the Litani River, 10 kilometers out of the border of Lebanon. We were ready. And another day passes, and another day passes, and we, all of us, we say, why aren't we doing what we were trained to do for the past 20 years? And I don't know if you remember that. You were then, 16 years old, 10th grade. There was one Friday that all of us sat in our homes at 4 p.m. watching a TV and waiting. What did we wait for? You remember? We were waiting for Nasrallah's speech. The first out of many. Now, this is an example for the most non-Zionistic act one can do. Meaning, even after October 7th, we're still waiting for the enemy to tell us what we're going to do. Now, I want to again pull you back in time. Imagine Ben Gurion. Imagine all these people sitting on their ass and waiting for someone to tell them that they will get the state of Israel. We would never had this miracle. They created it. They didn't respond to anything. They made reality. And this is what we need to go back in time to do. So we need a vision for peace, and we need to be clear with ourselves. What does it mean, and what peace is? And we also need to allow ourselves to say to the world, to our enemies, and mainly to ourselves, and know that if they are not willing to make peace, they will find us at war. And this will not be another round, because our enemy now have a conception that is the reality in the past few decades, that time is working for them, because they know that every time there's another round. Let me ask you this. Do Hamas care that the Palestinians say that 70,000 people died in Gaza? I don't know if that's the right number, but let's assume it is. Do you think Hamas cares about these people? You're wrong. They deeply care. They were hoping the 200,000 would be dead, but only 70,000 for now. Do you think that Hamas cares that we demolished 20 out of 30 hospitals? They were hoping that we will demolish all of them. It serves them. Look at the reality. Today, the situation of Hamas is better or worse than it was before October 7th? Better. Far better. Far better. Look at their status in the world. Is it better or worse than before? Every house in the world knows these Nazis. Many of them support them. Is Israel's situation better or worse? Far worse. 2 years of fighting, and our situation has plummeted, and we didn't even win them. That's how deep the failure is. And then people tell me on the street, but we must keep right-wing government. What for? What for? What could have been worse than the reality we have? And it's not like I have any expectations from the left. After all, they didn't set an alternative for 30 years. They have no way, apart from saying what they say, the opposite. That's not a way. That's not leadership. We must rehab ourselves from these failed camps and go back to Zionism. So this, in terms of national security. Education. I'll go to another field. Education is strategic for Israel. Now, some of you studied here, some of you did not. In Israel, we don't have an education system. First of all, I'll tell you this. I have 5 kids in the educational systems. My expectation is as high as I want them to come back home alive. Anything else is a bonus. 0 expectations. That's the level of the educational system in Israel. But we don't have even one. We have 4, or even more. We have the secular, we have the religious, we have the Haredi, and we have the Arabs. And then we have all kind of independent streams within the Haredi. Some of these streams are completely non-Zionist. They get money from the state, teachers occupied by the state, and they teach against the state. As anti-Zionistic as can be. And this is a catastrophe. So strategically, we lost our ability to create a story of Israel. And I don't care if you're Muslim or Haredi, or it doesn't matter. You're an Israeli. And as Israeli, you need to belong to the Israeli state. You don't want to be here? Fair enough. Go. But if you're here, you're Israeli. So the reform there would be, again, to be very binary. Today, you have to understand that streams that do not want to be part of Israel, they get only 70% funding of the state. And they teach nothing that contributes to the state. So in education, we want mandatory 2 educational cores. One is an identity. This is the Zionist state. We need to be clear about it. Yes, also to Muslims who live here. They are welcome as minority, as long as they understand that this is the Jewish state. We are not going away. The sooner they will give up on all their fantasies, exactly like the Messiah right wing will give up on their fantasies, the better it would be for them. And they are not giving up on that because we're not able to look in their eyes and tell them This is done. 1948, there was a division offer. We accepted it. You declined it. You opened an all-or-nothing war, and you've lost. On a normal reality, you would be left with nothing. But this is an abnormal reality, so you are left with something. But now you need to neglect those dreams because we are not going away. And believe me, I have one video in Explain to Me where I speak to an Arab and I tell him that. And he tells me, I prefer you being honest with me far more than all the people of the left that pretend that I'll get something else in return. I'll send it to you. I think it's crucial for us to say who we are. Identity, this is the Zionist state, and Western education. Because Israel forever will need a first world army, which means that we need first world economy, which means that we need everyone to participate in the workforce. And if you choose to prevent from people to participate, you're doing an anti-Zionist act. And we cannot allow it. So you will get zero funding from the state. We will take the oxygen from those educational systems because they endanger the existence of the Jewish people in their land. So it's harsh, but it's mandatory. This is 50% of the curriculum. On top of that, every municipality will choose what they want. So Bnei Brak will want a halacha, and Tel Aviv will want whatever they want. All good. But 50% mandatory, or you get zero from the state. That's education. I'll say very quickly about government, and we'll open for question. Government basically, and it's a prime example of how we have politicians rather than leaders. There's a consensus between the Israeli Democracy Institute that represents the left wing to the Kohelet Institute that represents the right wing, that the maximum number of ministries Israel needs is 15. Today we have over twice than that, 32 or 33. Completely useless. Now this brings two tragedies, three maybe. One, tons of money is being spent to nothing. Two, it's the worst. You remember I talk about Dugma Ishit, leadership, lead by example. It's the worst example one can give. Three, and that's the far worse, it's completely inefficient. I'm sure some of you all know people who are CEOs, etc. Ask a CEO if he has 33 VPs. It doesn't make sense. You can't run a state, you can't run anything like that. Nothing is transparent, everything is fighting, nothing is working, and this is Israel 2026. Things here, they don't work. We saw it. On October 7th, we woke up to a morning that there was no state. Not just no army, no state, nothing worked. The only thing that worked is the Zionist people. They jumped, they saved the day, they contributed, they were from both political camps, they were here, but they were the only ones here. The state didn't exist, and it still doesn't exist. All they do is tearing us apart. So 15 ministers to the maximum, and a governmental reform that takes power from the judicial system because it's broken and it needs to be weakened, but not taking this power and put it in the government, but taking power also from the government because it's far too strong. Because in Israel, at the moment, out of 3 authorities, one is completely incapable, the Knesset, and then 2 authorities fighting between one another who has more power. And that was 2023. Everyone knows that the judicial system is broken and needs a reform. But not the one Yariv Levin wanted. Because Yariv, he said, I want to weaken the court of laws, take the power to the government in order to implement right-wing policy. The opposition objected, not because they think that there's no need for reform, but because for them, the judicial system is a way to implement left-wing policy. And on this, the state has been torn apart. None of these sides asked what is the right thing for the state of Israel. And the right thing is to take power from both of these authorities, bring much power back into the Knesset, and even more power to distribute down to the local authorities. So that's the reform. So in the political system, when I'm being asked, who will you sit with? I will sit only with parties who will give me these reforms. Now take a minute and think with yourself, who can give us these reforms, and you'll understand that the only ones that can give it to us are parties that their voters are Zionist. Parties with non-Zionist voters will never give it to us, but it's not theirs to give. It's yours. It's the Zionist people that need to reclaim leadership here and say this is the state of Israel. And once we set up the blueprints for the Zionist state, anyone who accepts them is welcome. Arabs, Haredi, all is good. But we must know who we are, put a vision, and go there. That's Zionism. So that's the preview. But if you have any questions, then go for it, and let's have a conversation now.
You talked in the beginning about like the experience that you had with the Bedouins, and then also like you said nobody's going anywhere. You talked a lot about October 7th and safety and stuff like that. But you never really said what your vision is for the future. You said two states valid, and Eretz Yisrael Shema is valid. But what do you guys feel is
the vision for Israel?
Yeah.
So for me, the vision of Israel is achieving the goal of being a safe home for the Jewish people. Now, for every question, it has a different answer. So let's say on the national security end, we need to present two plans. One has the very creative name, the plan of peace, and the other one, the plan of war. Simple as that. The plan of peace is priority, and we say we want peace, like I said, 6 times a day in 10 different languages. I said it the other way around, but I meant the same. All right, that's what we want. Now we do diplomatic work with the world, etc., and we say, what does it mean, peace? Peace basically means that we have the let's do a bit of a history lesson, all right? 1948, the British got mandate to establish 2 states here, like they got on Jordan and the France got in Syria and Lebanon. All of these mandates were successful apart from one, here. The British counselor went back to England, say I've failed. They asked him, how come? He said, there's a conflict there that I can't solve. They told him, what do you mean you can't solve? He said, there's one nation there wants to have a state, the Jewish people, and one nation that prioritizes the first nation to not have a state, the Palestinians. 80 years have passed, nothing really had changed. That's the truth. Throughout this way, in the 90s and in the 2000s, we've tried multiple times, 4 in particular, to actually create 2-state solution. You had Oslo, and then you had White Plantation, and then you had Camp David, and then you had Annapolis. The consistent thing in all of this is eventually the Palestinians said no through a wave of terror. They continue to prioritize us not being here instead of them having an independent state. We need to acknowledge that. So trying to make peace is Zionist. Not acknowledging that the other side doesn't want to make peace is non-Zionist. That's being blind and being fooled by wishful thinking. And we need to say that clear. I have responsibility for these kids. My responsibility is that October 7th will never ever happen again. Now there are only 2 ways that I can assure that. One is to not have an enemy on the fence, and 2 is to not have an enemy on the fence. It sounds similar, but it's not. One means that the people live on the fence are not an enemy. They are Swedish. They don't want to kill me every day of their life. That's one alternative. If they are not Swedish, then they cannot be on the fence. Israel needs to be clear about that, meaning to say to the Palestinian in Judah and Samaria, you have 2 alternatives. You think time works for you. You think you have nothing to lose. By the way, they have good reason to think so, because in the past 20 years, mostly Netanyahu's strategy, he showed them that they really have nothing to lose, only to gain. We need to change the hourglass and to tell them you think you have nothing to lose, but you have tons to lose. You are either neglecting completely the way of terror, give up on the core of the Palestinian identity, no right of return, no education for terrorism, no supporting terrorism, nothing. And eventually, after a few good decades that you will show that you can give up your thirst for Jewish blood, you will have something that is similar to a state minus the army. Like after World War II with Japan, that until today doesn't have an army. They need to go through de-radicalization process like Nazi Germany did after World War II. They need to convince us. We've tried. They need to convince us that they have neglected the way of terror. If they won't do it, then this is war. By war, I mean, when you go to officer school, you learn about the concept of winning, הכרעה in Hebrew. הכרעה is not demolishing all houses, and it's not to kill a few tens of thousands of people. It's not. הכרעה, victory, is to make the other side give up on their ability or desire to fight you. That's from officer school in the IDF. When you look at a terror organization and you ask yourself, even you guys, 18 years old kids, you knew, or men and women, you knew that breaking all the houses will not surrender a terrorist organization. You need to ask yourself what will make them surrender. And what will make them surrender, or what they value, is land and control over civil population. So this is what you need to attack. You need to say, for example, Gaza or Judah and Samaria, as long as you're in the way of terror, every day we are taking more and more land and we're connecting it to the state of Israel. But the reason why, and this is important, is not to build settlements, because that's not the goal of Israel. It's to make all the means that we need in order to make sure October 7th will not happen again. So according to this vision, in few years' time, 50% of what we call sea sections, sea territories in the Palestinian Authority, will be completely Israeli, occupied and controlled completely, forever, not temporarily, by Israel, but not to build settlements, but to make sure that we don't have an enemy on the fence. Now, when you do that, you're able to also do the diplomatic work to bring the world to be with you. Like, I'll tell you even more than that. The chances of bringing the world to this is far higher than it was on 48 to establish a Jewish state. But they did it because they were focused. And we need to be focused as well and not confused. So this is the vision for how we're going to make sure that October 7th will never happen again, and for what the Zionist mentality should be if we want to live here.
So do you think that the time for peace has passed?
No, I'm saying I can't be responsible for my enemy. I'm responsible for me. I do me, they do them. If they choose to do terror, then there won't be peace. If they will want to make peace, they will find the best partner on earth to make peace with. But I refuse to be responsible for their miserable choices.
I know you talk about your party's main issues being related to security and the Zionist character of the state through education, but in a government, there's a lot of the work is done outside of those categories. So what's your party's economic policy when it comes to cost of living and taxation, environmental policy, totally independent of the conflicts? That's still important.
Yeah, so we took 4 flags. That 4 things that are strategic and existential for this point of time. Environment is crucial, not now. And many other, in transportation as well. I don't want to say that, they're unimportant. I'm saying that now we need to be focused, and 4 is not enough, is not a little. So we have all kind of people pitching to us all kind of ideas, but I wanna focus is what we're going to be all in on. Finance, or the cost of living, is definitely one of them, because this is existential. So on this, we are dealing quite a lot. Basically, to be very kind of high level about it, the priorities in Israel are upside down. Prioritize funding of things that work against it. I think, we believe in El Adegel, that the people who serve Israel should be at the top of the pyramid, meaning they need to get everything by the state. All the resources need to go there. It used to be the norm once. When I was younger, when I was 20 years old, or 10 years old even, people who didn't do miluim, reserve, couldn't find work in many places. Today, if you do miluim, you can't find work because much of the time you're not there. So the pyramid has shifted completely. The serving population should be a top priority. Where will the money come from? Easy, from the non-serving communities. Today it's the upside down. You bribed political partners and you neglect the serving community. You see it with this government on the highest volumes one can imagine. that they pass non-Zionist laws with non-Zionist parties for them to not serve, and they are reducing and hurting the people that actually sacrifice their life in order to protect the existence of Israel. More in the world of finance, basically, it's unbearable that this state is the most expensive in the OECD by a big gap. This must change. It can change. You want it. You want security that you can provide your own food here in Israel. We need this assurance. So fund it directly. Don't roll it to the consumers. You do it as a state. Prioritize the important things. So in that specifically, we also wrote a plan. In all the other fields, we have an opinion. But it's not something that we're going to go all in on.
You've been saying throughout your speech that Israel is in this constant, existential battle against its neighbors. And I guess I'm curious, what exactly, I want you to expand a little bit more on that, because at least for me, it seems like we're in a reality where, our biggest agitator in Iran is crumbling, and who knows what's going to happen, but it's likely going to result in a regime that's more friendly to Israel. Likely, no one knows. But all of these, October 7th, the worst terror attack and arguably the worst day in Israeli history, only killed 1,200 people in a country of however many million, 10 million or something, 7 million. I guess what the existential part, I could see the argument that you make in 1948, but with an amazing military and strong allies, the strongest allies in the world, in the US, where do you get that existentialist mindset from, and how, and do you think that not having that existentialist mindset would not allow you to justify some parts of your policy?
Yeah, so I'll tell you this. First of all, I think we can all see that the world is changing very rapidly. In all areas, by the way, also terms in finance, when you look at AI, you understand that 2 years from now, we're going to go to a completely different world, and worldly order will change, like it is for the history of mankind. I don't know what happened with China. I don't know what will happen with China versus the United States. It's not that the US is the most stable place on earth at the moment. Let's acknowledge that at least. The dollar is losing power all over, not by mistake, by design. And I don't know where the world will go. I think that we need to at least be humble enough to understand that we do not know. And in a reality, when we do not know, the one thing we do need to know is that we can count on us. Now, it's not the first time in history that it happens to us. Go back 150 years back in time, all right? There were two failed and miserable ideologies, like now. One was the Orthodox that said, let's build ghettos in Europe and isolate ourselves and we will be okay. The other one was the Reform, who said, let's be nice to everyone and they will be nice to us and assimilate and everything will be okay. Both of these ideologies failed. Zionism came and saved us all. Now we're in a very similar moment. The world is changing. Europe is changing dramatically. The United States changing dramatically. China is changing dramatically and getting a lot of power. I don't think that we should last speed. How do you say last speed? That we should. Not commemorate. I don't think that we should assume that Iran is disappearing anytime soon. And even if this regime will go, you don't really know who will come after. Take Syria as an example. Assad was bad, but in some ways, it was on our end, it was kind of stable. Now, Syria is an open border that has a real enemy of ISIS and all kind of gangs that can, everything in the Middle East is very unstable and can change in a second. And that's why I'm not saying that we should constantly be in war. I'm saying that we should never let our guards down, and we should always remember to be in a consciousness of Shomer Israel, of guarding our home, because the world is unstable. We see regimes changing up and down in Europe, far right, far left. People are running away from Europe and then are running back to Israel because suddenly it became anti-Semitic. Because even if at some places it starts as anti-Muslim, immediately it goes to be anti-Jewish as well. So looking at reality and being honest around it, I think we can agree probably that we don't know where reality is heading towards. And because I don't know, what I do want to know is that there is one place on earth that is a safe haven for Jewish people to live and prosper in.
Is there any factoring in your mind of morality when it comes to creating a space where the Jewish people can prosper, as in Israel?
Of course, I think, when you say prosper, look, even Ben Gurion, let's look at history. It's a good place to learn on. All right, at first, the state was established by communists. Ben Gurion was communist, and Russia and the Red Book, etc. In 56, when it stopped serving the Zionist idea, he flipped in a second to be with the West in Mivtza Kadesh. In a second, because he didn't really care about communism. He cared about the existence of Israel. All right? Now, when I look at the world, the only people that, for some reason, sit in the government, but they say we don't need America, the only people who can actually say that are people who never held M16 and saw that at the side, next to the magazine, it says property of the US government. Like many other of the ammunitions and everything that we have, from the fighter jets to everything, basically. So we need to be connected to the West civilization. We don't have any alternative in that sense, because we need the technological power in order to win war. And that obliges us to morality. I'll say even more. We don't want to be them. We want to be us. We want to live as us. Judaism, in its core, is full of morality. But we also need to acknowledge who stands in front of us. And, you don't need elite intelligent unit to understand who Hamas is. Just open Al Jazeera, they say it out loud. Now, when you do that and you neglect another failure of the government, but of Netanyahu in specific, you need to fight on the narrative. When I went to Harvard, I wanted to study Arabic. I went to Arabic courses, we got 4 textbooks, 4. And every lesson we used to read a text. All of the texts were on Palestine. I asked the teacher, don't you have text on other Muslim countries? She said, I don't know, all our textbooks are like this. They have been working. We were not. We were fighting here because we assumed that there is no existential threat, and we allowed them to build a complete system working against us. This also must change. So I'm saying that the consciousness of instability of the world must be engraved within our blood. Not for no reason, every Pesach that is soon come, we say every generation should look themselves as if they were slaved in Egypt. This is correcting this reality as well. We must acknowledge it's a possibility, a very likely possibility. Therefore, we need to do everything in our power to prevent this possibility. Therefore, we need to work with people who are willing to prioritize the existence of Israel over their particular ideology. And if we will work with these kind of people, be sure that the ruled ideology will be perfect for all Jews as they are. סבבה. בא לי, I want a woman to ask. Only men asked. Anyone? Yes, at the back. אתה יכול להביא לה? לצלם אותך או לא?
You always talk about the country being Zionist, the government being Zionist. What do you think Zionists mean? And also, do you think someone can be Zionist not living in Israel?
Yeah, absolutely. I said Zionism is to prioritize the existence of Israel on top of which Israel you want. So it's putting the mere existence before your particular ideology. Everyone is entitled to have their particular preferred ideology. But to say if the state is not exactly what I want, then why do I need a state? That's to be non-Zionist. So Zionism is to say, take me for example. I think this is the worst government in the history of Israel since the days of the Bible. Honestly. But I didn't think for one day to not go and be at service for the Zionist idea, which is the existence of the state of Israel. So this is Zionism. Now you can do it from here or you can do it from Miami. It doesn't matter. I'll tell you more than that. We must also have people in Miami and in LA, and we must. That's how the Jewish people work. That's how they're able to do things. So absolutely. Nevertheless, Israel must be the best place on earth for every Jewish to live in, regardless if they're Orthodox, Reform, gay, it doesn't matter. It has to be that. And that's why the hold of the religious institutions in how Israel appears is very bad. Exactly like it's terrible, the disconnection from the Jewish heritage that many people have now and say, what me Judaism has together with one another. So it needs to be balanced in that way, but obviously you can be Zionist from far away. She asked me if I think that you need to sacrifice every principle for the state. And in the short answer is yes. But the state, and it kind of refers to what this guy was asking, in order for us to be able to live here in safety and prosperity, we must be moral. So we can't, let's take Jewish terrorism, for example, that we have in Judah and Samaria. For me, they are 100% terrorists. I don't care if they're Muslim or Jewish, it's the same. Terror is terror, full stop, 1,000 exclamation marks. The fact that people in this government do not speak like that, it's a moral failure, deep moral failure that, by the way, jeopardizes the existence of the state of Israel. So it's not about not being moral, it's being super moral and be able to say the truth. Not through a filter of a particular ideology and your faction in population or your base, political base, but through what's right for the state of Israel. Jewish terrorism jeopardizes the existence of the state of Israel, full stop. And it should be condemned by 120 Knesset members. Unfortunately, we have politics here like soccer game. When you go to a soccer game, your team won, your team lost, you keep cheering for that team. My expectation and my hope that if I elected someone who's jeopardizing the state of Israel, I don't need the other camp to demonstrate against them. I will fire them because I elected them. But we mixed everything here. We turned it into a soccer game instead of a reality. And the price is your blood and mine.
There are currently about 10 different parties that are kind of running inside of the Zionists, depending on what you define Zionist. Do you think it might not be a problem that there are so many options, and that would you think about running conjoined together or joining other parties, or having a mixed party and not running, risking not getting enough votes to pass the minimum vote count?
Yeah, so look, I think that once election will happen, eventually there'll be gravitation and unity, etc. I'll tell you, we play on a very specific field that is not on either side. Many of these parties, eventually, it's all being taken down to the question, so will you sit with Bibi or not? And if you say no, then you're on one side of the game. If you say yes, you're on another. We say, fuck this question. And it's a moral position that you need to acknowledge in the fact that we will sit with anyone giving us these reforms, because that's the Zionist way. Do you ask me if I want Bibi to be the Prime Minister? 1,000 times no. Am I willing to sacrifice the state only to be right? 1,000 times no. So in that sense, there aren't many people or new forces that say it loud and clear. We try now to bring all the new players into this moral position, because we are not the thing. We are an ingredient. We are not a product. We acknowledge that. We need all the new players to join to this perception. Anyone who will be willing to neglect completely the game of the camps and join to this attitude, we will be happy to be united with him. I'll tell you even more. I'm happy to be the very last. I'm happy to retire. I never wanted to stand here and actually lead this movement. And so if I'll find someone who's willing to carry this message better than me, I'll be more than happy to give them the place. So if there'll be another group who is better in us in leading this voice, they can have it. I'll support them, full time. So I think that eventually there will be unifications. Once elections will happen, there is no place for more than one. And I think that what's unique in us is that we take voters from both camps. And that's unique, because most players take voters from one camp or the other. We take from both, and that's the strategy, to create a deadlock, that no side can establish government without us, and we won't join any of the sides.
What's the big difference between you guys and other Milunik organizations? Let's say Yoav Zender also say like Zionist government takes votes from both sides, and like you will see that everybody will do whatever you want.
So it's a continuation of this. One, Yoaz is not new. When I say new people, I mean new people. Yoaz was in the political system for 1 year, transferred 4 parties, screwed over both sides. For me, this is not new. This is more of the same, to be honest. And in that sense, when I say we'll be united with others, I don't mean with old players. I mean new people, fresh blood, who are bringing the values of now into the sphere. I think in that sense, Yoaz is a politician, was and still is. In that sense, it hasn't changed, and he was in the political system. By the way, when you look at the political chaos that he has a lot of shares in this political chaos. And that's why I think he, like all the others, should retire and move aside. He's not doing it, whatever. That's one. 2, he identifies himself as right-wing. I think that saying I'm right, I'm left is already eternalizing the problem. And so these are 2 reasons why we differ from him quite dramatically.
What is Ella Degel plan for rehabilitating Israel image in the public eye, like in the world eye, in the near future?
So, you know, I started saying before, but Netanyahu thinks that that diplomatic work is 2 speeches a year, one in the Congress and one in the UN. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs doesn't exist for a decade already. I remember when I was in Palo Alto in 2015, I knew the ambassador. I asked him to help me fundraise for Desert Stars. He told me, I'll help you. I don't have money to celebrate Independence Day, Israel Independence Day in Israel. I need to fundraise the community here. That's how low we got. I think that, look, I'll tell you this. I think Israel's problem is not just in explaining the narrative. I think Israel's problem is in the product itself. So if the product is shit, then it's very hard to explain it. When you have people inside the government or against the government who are on the screens of Al Jazeera, whether it's people that want to hurt the government so badly that they're willing to say terrible things about the state of Israel and jeopardize it, or whether it's ministers who saying terrible things like we should nuke Gaza or whatever, I have the Iran exam. If you are being used by Al Jazeera, you are on the wrong side of history. And we have many very kind of respectable, supposedly people starring in Al Jazeera. They should ask themselves what's happening on. So the product is a problem. We need to be better. But these battles are separated. Ben-Gurion said that we need to fight the Nazis as if there's no white book, and to fight the white book, the British, as if there's no Nazis. We should do the same. We should fight on our image and anti-Semitism as if Israel is perfect. But we also need to fight to make Israel perfect as if there's no anti-Semitism. Now, these 2 serve each other because, and now I go to what you asked. If you have a vision for peace, then you're able to also bring the world to support you when you do war. Because you say, it's not what I want. But when you say, my intention is to build Jewish settlements in Khan Yunis, there's no chance in the world that any explaining will work, because your core of reason why is flawed. It's not about your existence, it's about your religious aspirations. And no one in today's world will go with you on that, and rightfully so. If you remember one thing of the lecture, is that you need to walk out this door feeling that the entire future and existence of the Jewish people is on your shoulders. Now, you're not alone. You're with each other. You're with me. You're with us. You're not alone. But the conscience that you must hold is that you are responsible, whether you, in person, whether the state will exist in 5 years or not. Whether the Jewish people will be prosecuted or will be able to defend itself. It's on you. And I want to tell all of you that I'm super available. You can text me on WhatsApp, on Instagram. You can invite me to places with your parents. Also in the US, on April I'm in the US. So happy to meet everyone and bring this narrative, because I believe that our generation now has a mission. Zionism is still very early on, and we need to make sure that for eternity, the Jewish people have a safe and prosperous home to live in, and this place is Israel. So thank you so much for everything.